Hello, welcome to BEH 217 Behavioral Approaches. Today we're talking about the Adlerian approach, named after Alfred Adler. Alfred Adler, 1870 to 1937. He grew up in Vienna in a family of 6 boys and 2 girls. During Adler's early childhood, he was sickly and very much aware of death. At age 4, he almost died of pneumonia, and he heard the doctor tell his father that Alfred is lost. Adler associated this time with his decision to become a physician. Additionally, he had a brother who also died next to him in bed, so that's going to certainly impact you as a child. Adler's emphasis on the importance of community feeling and acting with social interest are what helps people overcome inferiority feelings and know that they have a place in the world. So in a nutshell, that's his entire philosophy, but we're going to spend the next several minutes discussing it in slightly more detail. So Adler believed that the individual begins to form an approach to life somewhere in the first 6 years of life. He focused on the person's past as perceived in the present and how an individual's interpretation of early events continued to influence that person's present behavior. According to Adler, humans are motivated primarily by social relatedness rather than by sexual urges. So getting into that psychosocial aspect that Erikson talked about. Behavior is purposeful and goal-directed, and consciousness, more than unconsciousness, is the focus of therapy. Adler's theory starts with a consideration of inferiority feelings, which he saw as a normal condition of all people and as a source of all human striving. Rather than being considered a sign of weakness or abnormality, inferiority feelings can be a wellspring of creativity. They motivate us to strive for mastery, success, otherwise known as superiority, and completion. We are driven to overcome our sense of feeling inferior and to strive for increasingly higher levels of development. Adlerians put the focus on re-educating individuals and reshaping society. Adler was the forerunner of a subjective approach to psychology that focuses on internal. Adler was a pioneer of an approach that is holistic, social, goal-oriented, systemic, and humanistic. Adler was the first systemic therapist. He maintained that it is essential to understand people within the systems in which we live. Adlerians attempt to view the world from the client's subjective frame of reference, an orientation described as phenomenological. Say that 3 times fast. The quote on the right-hand side by Anais Nin, who was a writer in the mid-20th century, is a really good way of describing this idea. We do not see things as they are. We see things as we are. In other words, we cannot look at anything that is subjective. Subjective meaning opinion-based, something that's more construed as whether it's beautiful or ugly, or whether something is disgusting or nice, whereas something objective, hard, soft, objective versus subjective, very important to understand those differences. But something that's subjective is going to be regarded by virtue of the filter that we carry inside of us. And people pay attention using this filter because we've all had different experiences. So somebody who grew up and really likes that minimalist perspective is not going to enjoy something that's going to be very filled with a lot of rococo and details. They want clean lines, they want surfaces. And somebody who really likes that Victorian look of all kinds of little doodads and gadgets and stuff, they're not going to like that minimalist look. So paying attention to the individual way in which people perceive their world, referred to as their subjective reality, includes the individual's perceptions, thoughts, feelings, values, beliefs, convictions, and conclusions. Along with Freud and Jung, Alfred Adler was a major contributor to the initial development of the psychodynamic approach to therapy. After a decade of collaboration, Freud and Adler parted company. Freud then asserted that it was not possible to support Adlerian concepts and still remain a good psychoanalyst. Adler stressed the unity of personality, contending that people can only be understood as integrated and complete beings. In this sense, we create ourselves rather than merely being shaped by our childhood experiences. So Adler felt we took a much more active role in who we become, whereas Freud saw us as more like a tree in the wind that was pushed in one way or another by forces external to our control. After Adler's death in 1937, Rudolf Dreikurs was the most significant figure in bringing Adlerian psychology to the United States, especially the principles that applied to education, parenting, individual and group therapy, and family counseling. Dreikurs is credited with giving impetus to the idea of child guidance centers and to training professionals to work with a wide range of clients. This is one of his recommendations for managing children. When children are allowed to help make family decisions, they tend to be much more supportive and happier with family life. Also, when allowed to help make rules, they will follow them much more closer than if rules are forced on them. All of these add up to a happier home for all. In other words, running your home like a democracy is going to make everybody happier. Now let's go back to this concept of the holistic view. So this concept implies that we cannot be understood in parts. Rather, we must look at all aspects of family, culture, school, and work. In other words, we are the sum of all of our experiences, all of our influences. The human personality becomes unified through development of a life goal. An individual's thoughts, feelings, beliefs, convictions, attitudes, character, and actions are expressions of his or her uniqueness, and all reflect a plan of life that allows for movement toward a self-selected life goal. An implication of this holistic view of personality is that the client is an integral part of a social system. There is more emphasis on interpersonal relationships than on the individual's internal psychodynamics. Adler chose the name individual psychology from the Latin individuum, meaning indivisible, for his theoretical approach. For Adler, individual psychology meant indivisible psychology, meaning you cannot divide it. Adler emphasized the unity and indivisibility of the person and stressed understanding of the whole person in the context of his or her life, how all dimensions of a person are interconnected components, and how all of these components are unified by the individual's movement toward a life goal. So, in other words, what we're looking at here is, imagine your life is like baking a cake. You take the eggs, you take the butter, you take the flour, you take whatever, you take the vanilla, you take whatever, if you're adding chocolate to it, whatever, and you mix it all up. Well, that's who you are as a person. Now, for Freud, you have to be divided into those various ingredients. And Adler thought that there's no way, after a person has been mixed up and created, there's no way to actually divide up that person because there's too many influences that have mixed everything together. There's my metaphor for the day. Individual psychology assumes that all human behavior has a purpose, and this purposefulness is the cornerstone of Adler's theory. Adler replaced deterministic explanations with teleological, purposive, goal-oriented ones. A basic assumption of individual psychology is that we can only think, feel, and act in relation to our goal. We can be fully understood only in light of knowing the purposes and goals towards which we are striving, which is why when, according to Adler, we don't really know where we want to be or what we want to do with our lives, or we feel aimless, we feel unhappy. Adlerians are interested in the future, but they do not minimize the importance of past influences. They look for continuity by paying attention to themes running through a person's life. Adler stressed that the recognition of feelings of inferiority and striving for perfection or mastery as innate to humans. To understand human behavior, Adler believed it is essential to grasp the ideas of basic inferiority and compensation. According to Adler, the moment we experience inferiority, we are pulled by the striving for superiority. Adler maintained that the goal of success pulls people forward toward mastery and enables them to overcome obstacles. It is important to note that superiority, as used by Adler, does not necessarily mean superiority over others. Rather, it means moving from a perceived lower or minus position to a perceived better or plus position in relation to oneself. So if you think of it mathematically, it is a matter of moving forward on that number line. The movement from a feeling of minus to a desired plus results in the development of a life goal, which in turn unifies the personality and the individual's core beliefs and assumptions. So the more you move forward on that number line, the more your personality is unified. It is the characteristic way we think, act, feel, perceive, and live. Although events in the environment influence the development of personality, such events are not the causes of what people become. Rather, it is our interpretation of these events that shape personality. Faulty interpretations may lead to mistaken notions in our private logic, which will significantly influence present behavior. So, for example, if the goal is to finish college and you do not complete college because you fail a whole bunch of classes, you might have faulty interpretations of that. Did you not go to class? Did you not do your work? Or was the instructor truly not a good teacher? So you have to really look at the interpretation and try and analyze it from the perspective of an outsider. Once we become aware of the patterns and continuity of our life, we are in a position to modify these faulty assumptions and make basic changes. We can reframe childhood experiences and consciously create a new style of living. So for Adlerians, we want to look at our life experience through that lens of, are we interpreting our experiences accurately? And that is what we really seek out when we try to unify our personality. Social interest and community feeling, Gemeinschaftsgefuhl, are probably Adler's most significant and distinctive concepts. These terms refer to individuals' awareness of being part of the human community and to the individual's attitudes in dealing with the social world. In other words, you cannot avoid being part of some element of the community. And we, as humans, have a variety of communities in which we live. Work, neighborhood, family, etc. Social interest is the action line of one's community feeling, and it involves being as concerned about others as one is about oneself. This concept involves the capacity to cooperate and contribute to something bigger than oneself. So, is there something that you are passionate about? Is there a movement, civil rights, gender equality, anti-rape movement? Any of these things give you a social interest that is bigger than yourself. Community feeling embodies the feeling of being connected to all of humanity, past, present, and future, and to being involved in making the world a better place. Community feeling entails the evolutionary need to belong, and it manifests itself in courage, empathy, caring, compassion, engagement, and cooperation. So, the sense of community is excessively important because, as humans, we literally cannot survive without each other, and we have to recognize that. So, moving on to Adler's 3 life tasks, and he taught we must successfully master these 3 universal life tasks. Number 1, building friendships, which is our social task. Number 2, establishing intimacy, which is our love marriage task. And 3, contributing to society, which is an occupational task. All people need to address these tasks, regardless of age, gender, time in history, culture, or nationality. Each of these tasks requires the development of psychological capacities for friendship and belonging, for contribution and self-worth, and for cooperation. So we get a little Maslow working its way in here with his 5 levels to reaching self-actualization. These basic life tasks are so fundamental that impairment in any one of them is often an indicator of a psychological disorder. Our personality is the result of stances we have taken in relation to the life tasks we face. So you might say, well, what about priests or nuns? They don't have marriage. They don't establish that intimate relationship. Well, one could argue that they are married to the church. Nuns wear a wedding ring that indicates their commitment to Jesus and God. So, in a sense, they have committed this relationship and they have successfully completed this task. So moving on to his view of siblings. The Adlerian approach is unique in giving special attention to the relationship between siblings and the psychological birth position in one's family. Actual birth order is less important than the individual's interpretation or the psychological position of the child's place in the family. Because Adlerians view most human problems as social in nature, they emphasize relationships within the family as our earliest and perhaps our most influential social system. Birth order and the interpretation of one's position in the family have a great deal to how adults interact in the world. So just a general kind of look at how Adler looked at this. The oldest child generally receives a good deal of attention, and during the time he or she is the only child, he or she is typically spoiled as the center of attention. The child reasserts their position by becoming a model child, bossing the younger children, and exhibiting a high achievement drive. So, in a sense, they have become the third adult in the family. The second child, when there is only 2 children, is in a different position. The typical second child behaves as if she or he was in a race and is generally under full steam at all times. So in a lot of situations, there is this quest to catch up to the oldest child. Now, moving on to families larger than 2, When you have 3 or more, the middle child often feels squeezed out. This child may become convinced of the unfairness of life and feel cheated. The youngest child is always the baby of the family and tends to be the most pampered. The only child may not learn to share or cooperate well with other children. There are a lot of really wonderful books out there that go into more information about birth order if this is something that interests you. Here is some positive and negative traits by birth order. So we'll talk about the positive traits first. For the oldest child, nurturing and protective of others, very good organizer. Second child, highly motivated, cooperative, moderately competitive. Youngest child, realistically ambitious. And only child, they're very socially mature. They become a third adult in a sense. Negative traits. Now you'll notice there's a lot of negative traits for all of these. Oldest child, highly anxious, exaggerated feelings of power, unconscious hostility, fights for acceptance, must always be right, highly critical of others, and can be uncooperative. Second child, highly competitive, but easily discouraged. The youngest child, pampered style of life, dependent on others, wants to excel in everything, and can be unrealistically ambitious. Only child, exaggerated feelings of superiority, low feelings of cooperation, inflated sense of self, pampered style of life. So, how do we negate or minimize the negative traits? Well, that's where your parents come in, and they should mitigate some of those negative traits and enhance some of those positive traits, theoretically, of course. So let's get into Adlerian therapeutic goals. In general, the therapeutic process includes forming a relationship based on mutual respect, a holistic psychological investigation or lifestyle assessment, and disclosing mistaken goals and faulty assumptions within the person's style of living. This is followed by a re-education or reorientation of the client toward the useful side of life. The main aim of therapy is to develop the client's sense of belonging and to assist in the adoption of behaviors and processes characterized by community feeling and social interest. Adlerians favor the growth model of personality with an emphasis on strengths and well-being. Adlerian theory is an optimistic perspective that views people as creative, unique, capable, and responsible. The therapeutic process focuses on providing information, teaching, guiding, and offering encouragement. And we're going to talk about encouragement in a lot more detail in a few minutes. Adlerians operate on the assumption that clients will feel and behave better once they discover and correct their basic mistakes. And here's a quote on the right-hand side that I think is really important to realize that a lot of educators or teachers feel this way. The educator must believe in the potential power of their student, and he must employ all his art in seeking to bring his pupil to experience this power. So, a lot of times instructors will say to a student, I know you can do better, and it's a matter of the student recognizing that and seeing it, because students will oftentimes become used to mediocrity, and an instructor who recognizes that you are so much better than mediocrity will try to force you into realizing that you are better than that. And there might be some push and pull, but ultimately it's because the educator believes in the student more than the student believes in themselves. So let's start with assessing the client's functioning. And this begins with information that is gathered about the individual's style of living by means of a questionnaire on the client's family constellation, which includes parents, siblings, and others living in the home, life tasks, and early recollections. Early recollections are defined as stories or events that a person says occurred one time before he or she was 10 years of age. The process of gathering early memories is part of what is called a lifestyle assessment, which involves learning to understand the goals and motivations of the client. When this process is completed, the therapist and the client have targets for therapy. Therapy is helping clients to discover the purposes of behaviors or symptoms and the basic mistakes associated with their personal coping. Learning how to correct faulty assumptions and conclusions is central to therapy. Adlerian counseling is structured around 4 central objectives that correspond to the 4 phases of the therapeutic process. Phase 1, establish the relationship. Adlerian therapists focus on making person-to-person contact with clients rather than starting with the problem. Clients' concerns surface rather quickly in the therapy, but the initial focus should be on the person, not the problem. Therapists provide support, works to understand the client's identity and experience of the world. Therapists also provide structure and assist clients in defining personal goals, conduct psychological assessments, and offer interpretations. Phase 2. Assessing the individual's psychological dynamics. The aim of the second phase of Adlerian counseling is to get a deeper understanding of an individual's lifestyle. Focus is on understanding the client's identity. This assessment phase proceeds from 2 interview forms. Number 1, the subjective interview, is when the counselor helps the client tell his or her life story as completely as possible. The best subjective interviews treat clients as experts in their own lives, allowing clients to feel completely heard. Number 2, the objective interview, which seeks to discover information about A, how problems in the client's life began, B, any precipitating events, C, a medical history including current and past medications, D, a social history, E, the reasons the client chose therapy at this time, F, the person's coping with life tasks, and G, a lifestyle assessment. The objective interview relies heavily on an exploration of the client's family constellation, including the client's evaluation of conditions that prevailed in the family when the person was a young child, i.e. the family atmosphere, birth order, parental relationship and family values, and extended family and culture. Early recollections is the other assessment procedure. Early memories cast light on the story of our life because they represent metaphors for our current views. Therapists use early recollections as a projective technique and to A, assess the client's conviction about self, others, life, and ethics, B, assess the client's stance in relation to the counseling session and the counseling relationship, C, verify the client's coping patterns, and D, assess individual strengths and interfering ideas. Once the material has been gathered from both subjective and objective interviews with the client, integrated summaries of the data are developed. Common elements in the integrated summary are a narrative summary of the person's subjective experience and life story, a summary of family constellation and developmental data, summary of early recollections, personal strengths or assets, interfering ideas, and summary of coping strategies. We then move on to phase 3, encourage self-understanding and insight. Therapists interpret the findings of the assessment as an avenue for promoting self-understanding and insight. Self-understanding is only possible when hidden purposes and goals of behavior are made conscious. They act as a foundation for change. Disclosure and well-timed interpretations are techniques that facilitate the process of gaining insight. Interpretation deals with clients' underlying motives for behaving the way they do in the here and now. Adlerian disclosures and interpretations are concerned with creating awareness of one's direction in life, one's goals and purposes, one's private logic and how it works, and one's current behavior. Moving on to phase 4, reorientation and re-education. Final stage of the therapeutic process is the action-oriented phase known as reorientation and re-education, which means putting insights into practice. Clients are both encouraged and challenged to develop the courage to take risks and make changes in their life. And that, my friends, is not a small ask. People are very afraid to change things in their life, and this might be the most challenging aspect. Reorientation involves shifting rules of interaction, process, and motivation. Shifts are facilitated through changes in awareness, which often occur during the therapy session and which are transformed into action outside of the therapy office. Throughout this phase, no intervention is more important than encouragement. It is central to all phases of counseling and therapy. It is especially important as people consider change in their lives. Encouragement literally means to build courage. Discouragement is the basic condition that prevents people from functioning. Encouragement takes many forms depending on the phase of the counseling process. Encouragement is the universal therapeutic intervention for Adlerian counselors. It is a fundamental attitude or way of being rather than a technique. In the assessment phase, clients are encouraged to recognize that they are in charge of their own lives and can make different choices based on new understandings. In the relationship phase, encouragement results from the mutual respect the counselor seeks to engender. During the reorientation phase, encouragement comes when new possibilities are generated and when clients are acknowledged and affirmed for taking positive steps to change their lives for the better. Clients are encouraged to act as if they were the people they want to be. Adlerians use many different techniques to promote change. These techniques include immediacy, advice, humor, silence, paradoxical intention, acting as if, catching oneself, the push-button technique, which I'll explain in a moment, externalization, reauthoring, avoiding the traps, confrontation, use of stories and fables, early recollection analysis, lifestyle assessment, encouraging, task setting and commitment, giving homework, summarizing, and terminating. The goal of the push-button technique is to help clients become aware of their role in contributing to their own unpleasant feelings. In other words, we're going to push your buttons to see how you contribute to your own feelings of discontent. The characteristic of groups can be an effective way of helping people change. The group provides the social context in which members can develop a sense of belonging, social connectiveness, and community. Groups promote social interests, group cohesion, and a community feeling. Group therapy can include couples therapy, family therapy, correctional and rehabilitative counseling, school psychology, community mental health, and parent-child education. As mutual sharing of early recollections take place, group cohesion is increased. Counselors implement action strategies for group members to set tasks for themselves, apply group lessons to daily life, take steps in finding solutions to their problems. So let's talk about multiculturalism for a moment. Adlerian therapy focuses on multicultural and social issues to address the concerns of a contemporary global society. Concepts of age, ethnicity, lifestyle, sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender differences emerge in therapy. The therapeutic process is grounded within a client's culture and worldview rather than attempting to fit clients into preconceived models. So, for example, if you have a client who is Muslim and they wear a burqa that covers them from head to toe, you cannot As an American or a British person, look at that with anything other than acceptance, because that is part of their culture. It is not part of your culture, but is part of their culture. Adlerians investigate culture in much the same way that they approach birth and family atmosphere. Adlerian practitioners apply a range of cognitive and action-oriented techniques to helping clients explore the practical problems in a cultural context. So, the benefits of the Adlerian approach is that it is flexible and integrative. Adlerian therapists are resourceful and flexible in drawing on many methods which can be applied to a diverse range of clients in a variety of settings and formats. It is suited to brief, time-limited therapy, bringing a time limitation process to therapy conveys to clients the expectation that change will occur in a short period of time. Many of Adler's ideas were far ahead of his time. One of Adler's most important contributions was his influence on other therapy systems. Many of his basic ideas have found their way to most of the other psychological schools. Adlerian psychology is phenomenological, holistic, optimistic, and socially embedded theory based on basic assumptions that have been woven into various theories of counseling. So we have kind of the full package with Adlerian psychology. There are, however, shortcomings. The Adlerian approach tends to focus on the self as the locus of change and responsibility. Because other cultures may have different conceptions, this primary emphasis on changing the autonomous self may be problematic for many clients. Adlerian theory has some potential drawbacks for clients from those cultures who are not interested in exploring past childhood experiences, early memories, family experiences, and dreams. The culture of some clients may contribute to their viewing the counselor as the expert and expecting that counselor will provide them with the solutions. Also, some individuals from certain cultures may believe that it is inappropriate to reveal family information. A lot of people are brought up with the idea that anything that happens in the family home stays in the family home, and you can't even tell your doctor about it. So this would be an issue in terms of managing this issue with a psychoanalyst or a therapist. So the last issue here is Adler placed practicing therapy before organizing and presenting a well-defined and systematic theory. Many of Adler's ideas are vague and general, which makes it difficult to conduct research on some concepts. Although he was brilliant in many ways, he was not a scholar. So, unlike some of the contemporaries who publish and publish and publish, Adler was more focused on the practice of therapeutic work. So, that's it for this presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to email or text us if you are at this college. If you are not at this college, please feel free to leave a comment and we will get back to you as soon as we can. Thank you very much and have a great day.